Hello? A senior veterinary student in South Korea mysteriously disappeared after attending an end-of-term party. This case remains unsolved to this day and has attracted significant public interest. I have tried to investigate and present the most objective evidence so that everyone can form their own thoughts about the truth. The allure of unsolved cases lies in the fact that any assumption could potentially be correct. This story takes place in 2006 in Jeonju, South Korea, a city located about 230 kilometers southwest of Seoul. This city is one of South Korea's famous historical sites, with thousands of years of history and two prestigious universities. The protagonist of the story is 29-year-old Lee Yoon-hee. She studied statistics and fine arts at EWH, Women's University in Seoul, graduating in 2003. Due to her passion for animals, she decided to become a veterinarian. After graduation, she continued her studies in the veterinary department at Chunbuk National University, where she was known as an excellent student. In June 2006, when she was about to graduate, she mysteriously disappeared. What happened that year? To understand more, let's go back to June 5th, 2006. On this day, Yoon-hee, along with over 40 other veterinary students and some professors, went to a bar near the school for dinner. Since the next day, June 6th, was Memorial Day in South Korea, a public holiday they could enjoy themselves freely. The students and professors drank and chatted in a lively atmosphere until around 2:30 a.m. when the party was winding down and people began to leave. Yoon-hee was no exception as she prepared to leave a classmate, worried about her safety, offered to walk her home. Yoon-hee agreed and the two left the bar together. In fact, this classmate had secretly loved Yoon-hee for a long time, although their relationship was not official. Everyone at school knew about his feelings. Yoon-hee lived alone in a rented house near the school about 1.5 kilometers from the bar, a 15-minute walk. On the way home, Yoon-hee told her classmate that she had reached her house and suggested he go home. After ensuring Yoon-hee was safely home, he left and returned to his own house. On June 7th, after the holiday, students returned to school as usual. However, they noticed that Yoon-hee did not come to school and had no reason for her absence. This seemed strange because Yoon-hee was known as a good girl who loved studying and had never skipped class. Worried, her classmate went to Yoon-hee's house after school to look for her. When he arrived, he found the door locked and knocked several times, but no one answered. He only heard the dogs barking from inside. He thought Yoon-hee might have gone out, so he left. On June 8th, when her classmates saw that Yoon-hee was still absent, they realized she had been missing for 2 consecutive days without any reason. This was very unusual, so after school, A decided to go to her house with 3 other students to check on her. However, the situation was the same as the day before. The door was still locked. They knocked several times but got no response, only hearing the dogs barking inside. Immediately, they called Yoon-hee's parents in their hometown to ask about her situation. Her parents said she was not at home, and they felt something was wrong. The 4 decided to call 112 to report to the police. After receiving the information and statement from the group of students, the police arrived at Yoon-hee's apartment. They had to break the lock to enter. Inside, they found the house very messy, with items scattered on the floor. The 2 dogs in the house seemed to have been left unfed for several days. Their barking was weak, and it seemed that they had wandered around looking for food, which made the room even messier. After searching and finding no trace of Yoon-hee in the room, the police immediately contacted her family to begin an investigation. The police did not fully focus on the information because such missing persons cases were too common. Most missing people leave and then return without any issues. Although there was some suspicion, there seemed to be no signs of a struggle. Therefore, the police assumed that Yoon-hee might have gone somewhere to concentrate on painting. Her 4 classmates were very worried about Yoon-hee because 6 days earlier, on the evening of June 2nd, she had gone out to buy fruit. On her way back, a motorbike had snatched her handbag. Inside the bag were her wallet, Idaho, and mobile phone. At the time of her disappearance, she was in the process of redoing her documents and SIM card. After Yoon-hee disappeared, no one could contact her via mobile phone or track her location. Among the 4 friends in the group, 2 went with the police to the station to give statements, while the other 2 stayed in Yoon-hee's room awaiting news. At that time, they made a serious mistake. Knowing Yoon-hee's family was coming from their hometown to check on her situation, they decided to clean up the house, hoping her family wouldn't see the messy room. One of them was A, who had secretly loved Yoon-hee, and another was a classmate, B. They swept the floor, cleaned everything, and even washed the bed sheets. When B opened the washing machine, she found 4 towels and a pair of underwear inside. They seemed clean, but had not been dried. They also found 400,000 won in cash on the table in the room, likely the pay Yoon-hee received from a part-time job a few days earlier. Additionally, they found a fallen bouquet on the floor that should have been hung on the wall, Everything at the scene could have been crucial evidence, but no one realized they were disrupting it. At 6 p.m., Yoon-hee's parents and sister arrived at the apartment. Her sister entered the room first and found half a cigarette on the windowsill. Yoon-hee had smoked while attending university in Seoul but had quit since. Her sister, thinking Yoon-hee had started smoking again and fearing their parents' scolding, secretly threw away the cigarette, not knowing it could be evidence left by a perpetrator. Yoon-hee's family then inspected every corner of the house to gather more information. They discovered that the clothes Yoon-hee wore on June 6th were missing. Yoon-hee was a clean girl who changed her clothes daily, suggesting she had not returned to the apartment after the party. According to some students, Yoon-hee had attended the party laughing and joking without any signs of unusual behavior. Classmate A stated that on the way home she seemed a bit down and didn't talk much. He did not escort her into the house but was sure from a distance that she had returned to the apartment. The police questioned the surrounding neighbors, but they reported not hearing any unusual sounds that night, likely because it was late and most people were asleep. Yoon-hee's family found a backpack in the house, the one she usually carried to school. Students at the party had seen her with the backpack, so if it was in the house, she might have returned. Yoon-hee was very organized, planning her studies and life methodically. She had a habit of taking notes, but the notebook in the backpack was missing. A friend referred to as C recalled that on June 5th, she had gone to Yoon-hee's room to retrieve study materials for a surgery practice session. At that time, C saw a chair and a low table next to the bed. The table was special because it was very short, possibly used as a coffee table or study table. However, when inspecting the apartment, they found the table missing. Additionally, a hammer was missing from the toolbox, which should have been there. The police technicians examined Yoon-hee's computer and discovered that between 2:59 a.m. and 3:02 a.m. on June 6th, the computer accessed a website for about 3 minutes. After that, there was no activity on the computer until 4:21 a.m., more than an hour later, when the computer was forcibly shut down. The search keywords used during the 3-minute session included terms related to sexual harassment, 112, the police number in South Korea, and more. It seemed Yoon-hee might have been contemplating whether to call the police. On the night of the party, Yoon-hee was seated between a male classmate and a professor, both men. Was Yoon-hee harassed during the party? Many experts suggest they did not notice any unusual behavior from her during the party, but it's possible she was harassed and then went online after returning home to find out what to do. Alternatively, the culprit might have intentionally left these online traces to mislead the police. Data from the computer showed that at 4:21 a.m. on June 6th, the computer was shut down by holding the power button, which risks data loss unless the computer was frozen. This was not Yoon-hee's usual habit. So why was the computer shut down this way? Or was someone else responsible? 4 days after Yoon-hee's disappearance, on the night of June 10th, the police discovered that someone accessed a music website and checked her email using her account. Based on the IP address they found, the location was a hotel named Yeouido in Seoul. The police then extracted footage from the hotel's security cameras but did not find Yoon-hee or anyone else suspicious. On June 13th, a week after the incident, Yoon-hee's father discovered a pile of discarded items on a slope about 20 meters from her rental house. Carefully searching through the trash, he found a low table with its metal legs removed, leaving only the tabletop. Marks on the back of the table suggested the screws had been removed with a screwdriver. The police showed a photo of the table to several of Yoon-hee's classmates who confirmed it was the missing table from her rental house. Why were only the table's legs missing? Many speculate that the culprit was responsible. If metal collectors had been nearby, they would have broken it apart quickly without needing a screwdriver, as this method takes more time. So why did the culprit want to hide the table legs? One theory is that the culprit used a hammer to attack Yoon-hee that night, causing her to fall onto the table and bend the legs. Leaving the bent legs at the scene would indicate a struggle. Therefore, the culprit had to dispose of the table and hammer. Carrying the table with legs out at midnight would arouse suspicion, so removing the legs was a better option. Additionally, the bouquet, which should have been hanging on the table, had fallen to the ground and the two dogs could not have reached it. The police inferred that she might have been assaulted after returning home that night, with A being the prime suspect. After all, A was the one who suggested escorting Yoon-hee home after dinner, and only he knew what happened after leaving the pub, as no one could verify his story. Moreover, A and another student, B, stayed behind to clean the room after the police investigation, the best time to handle evidence. The police later took Yoon-hee's computer for further technical examination and found that at 2:18 p.m. on June 8th, someone had turned on the computer. This was when A and B were cleaning the room. Why was the computer turned on at that time? Was it accidental or intentional? When questioned, both students claimed they did not remember. During that period, and on June 6th, from 2:59 a.m. to 3:02 a.m., the computer was accessing the web. At 4:21 a.m. the same day, the computer was forcibly shut down, and on June 8th, at 2:18 p.m., the computer was turned on again. Upon further detailed examination, police found that from 3:02 a.m. to 4:21 a.m. on June 6th, the computer was not in standby mode, but someone had deleted the browsing history. During that time, the computer was accessing the web with keywords such as sexual harassment, 112, and these histories were retained. A had deep feelings for Yoon-hee. He not only remembered what clothes she wore daily, but also secretly collected her hair. Although they hadn't established a close relationship, Yoon-hee didn't dislike A as she wore the outfit A had given her when they were studying together. Was A the one who deleted the computer history? A claimed that after escorting Yoon-hee home, he went home to sleep and woke up at 10 a.m. the next morning. Living alone, his statement wasn't highly credible. During the ongoing investigation, Yoon-hee's missing notebook was also found on a laboratory bench at the university. However, it contained old notes such as a friend's mobile phone number and income from part-time work. The last entry in the notebook was about practicing surgery on the afternoon of June 5th and having dinner after the internship. The question is when the notebook was placed on the laboratory bench. Perhaps she had forgotten it earlier, or someone deliberately placed it there. Student A admitted suspicion from the police and stated he had no involvement in Yoon-hee's disappearance. The clothes he wore that day were taken for testing, revealing animal bloodstains on his shirt. However, the blood was not human, it was from an animal. Finding animal blood on a veterinary student is common, but what happened next was unusual. Chunbuk University's veterinary department usually performs experiments on dissected animals, collecting their bodies for a week before incinerating them. Normally, their weight is around 40 kg, but a week after the incident, the weight suddenly increased to 110 kg. It was the end of the semester with no large animal experiments scheduled, so why did the experiment suddenly increase in size? It could include Yoon-hee. If so, the perpetrator must have known everything about the university's veterinary department, and A fits that profile. The police then asked A to take a lie detector test. When A answered questions with no significant fluctuations in his biological indicators, it meant he was not lying. So who is the real perpetrator? Facing Yoon-hee's rental house is another vacant rental house from which you can see inside Yoon-hee's house. Although it was empty, some empty cigarette butts and toilet paper were found on the floor, suggesting someone had been there. Was Yoon-hee targeted by peeping Toms? Due to the lack of surveillance equipment around her rented house, the investigation has been challenging. Since the incident occurred, the police have restarted the investigation several times, revealing some new leads. In 2019, student D, a female half-sibling studying nearby, received an anonymous interview with the media. D revealed that a few days before the incident, she returned home alone late at night. As she reached the second floor of the hallway, she felt a strange man following her from behind. Terrified, she screamed loudly, waking up the neighbors, and the man panicked and fled. The second night after the incident, she felt hungry and wanted instant noodles but couldn't turn on the gas stove because the gas valve was outside the door. Nervous, she didn't dare go outside. The next morning, she went outside and found only her house's gas valve blocked while others were normal. She felt lucky that she didn't check outside last night, as intruders might have targeted her house. In May 2019, a surveillance video in Seoul caused a stir when a girl returned home alone, followed closely by a suspicious man. If she had closed the door just a second later, the man would have successfully entered the house, with potentially dire consequences. After failing to enter, the man lingered at the door for over a minute, attempting to open it before finally leaving. This incident raised strong alarms for many women, urging them to enhance their defense measures to ensure their safety, especially in areas without surveillance cameras late at night. Nearly 25 years have passed and the case remains unresolved. Yoon-hee's parents have distributed thousands of flyers but have yet to find their daughter. They still suspect that A was involved in her disappearance but believe their daughter is alive and hope for a reunion one day. The ultimate question remains, where did she go? What do you think happened to her? Why did she disappear without a trace like that? In life, have you ever felt a strong desire to possess things that others have? For example, when you see someone using the latest smartphone or driving a fancy scooter owned by your colleagues or friends, but when you finally get it, or someone gives it to you after a short period of time, you no longer feel as excited about it and consider its presence as something ordinary. Have you ever experienced this psychological phenomenon? It's a common human trait, although the degree varies from person to person. Now let's listen to today's story related to this issue. On May 27th, 2016, on the Nianjiang River in Jizhou City, Heilongjiang Province, a man was swimming in this stretch of the river. As he approached the shore, he accidentally touched an object underwater. It was a partially floating brown cloth bag. Being an avid angler, he immediately thought of it as a bag used by someone for carrying fish that slipped away and drifted here. With that thought in mind, he grabbed one end of the bag and tried to pull it in, but it was heavier than he expected. At this point, he sensed something unusual and quickly let go of the bag, climbed ashore, and called the people around to examine the strange object in the river. By this time, the bag had been pushed close to the shore by the river's waves, and its shape indeed resembled that of a fully grown person, causing swimmers in the area to immediately become suspicious and call the police. This was a fairly wide stretch of the river with a convenient traffic bridge nearby on the right side. The area had many large trees, and the grass was neatly trimmed, creating an ideal and refreshing space. People often brought cloth tents here for camping because the water was quite clean and suitable for swimming. When the police arrived and retrieved the brown cloth bag from the water, they opened it and were shocked to find the badly decomposed body of a male. Witnesses then revealed that a few days earlier, when they were swimming here, they had occasionally touched and felt a strange, soft object underwater, but they only thought it was some discarded item. Some curious individuals had even tried to reach out with their hands and feet to search for it, but they couldn't find it again, so no one paid much attention. It wasn't until the bag floated up and was pushed close to the shore that people discovered it was a corpse. After investigating, the police discovered a large 32-kilogram stone tied tightly to the victim's back, resembling a person wearing a backpack. The purpose of the stone was to weigh the body down and sink it to the riverbed. This stone had the same color, size, and shape as the stones on a nearby embankment. After basic geological examination, it was determined that the stone had been taken from the riverbank itself and used to tie it to the victim. At first glance, it could be inferred that this was not a typical drowning case, but a murder in which the body was thrown into the river. The victim was a tall and sturdy man, approximately 1.75 meters tall and weighing 65 kilograms, aged between 47 and 54. The body was wrapped in a brown cloth bag, but what was strange was that the victim's pants had been pulled down to thigh level and the belt had been untied. If it weren't for the cloth bag covering it, one could hypothesize that the pants slipped down as the body floated in the water. However, it was clear that the body was still wrapped in the brown cloth bag, so it's highly likely that the perpetrator did this. But why would the perpetrator pull the victim's pants down to thigh level? This situation could be easily understood for women, but the victim was a middle-aged man, so the likelihood is low. The victim was wearing brown sneakers with white soles. Their head had numerous large wounds, including a crushed skull with shattered fragments embedded in the brain tissue. The face was unrecognizable due to extensive decomposition from prolonged exposure to water. The forensic doctor initially concluded that the victim had been killed approximately 3 weeks ago, and the cause of death was traumatic brain injury resulting from repeated blunt force trauma to the head. In addition to the victim's pants being pulled down to the thigh, the pockets were turned inside out. It was highly unusual for someone's pants to be turned inside out in such a manner, indicating that the perpetrator had searched the body for something. After examining the body, the police found no evidence or belongings on the man that could establish his identity. Currently, the top priority for the police is to determine the victim's identity. Firstly, the police searched the database of recently missing persons with similar height, weight, and age characteristics as the victim. Eventually, they found a match for the victim's characteristics in the vicinity of the Nianjiang River. The individual was named Yu Guifu, 53 years old, a self-employed laborer. His wife had passed away several years ago, and his children were all grown up and working elsewhere. Yu Guifu's circumstances were difficult as he lived with his 8-year-old granddaughter named Xiao Yu. It was known that he went missing on the evening of May 6th, which was 21 days ago. In addition to the physical resemblances, his disappearance coincided with the approximate time of death of the victim. The police immediately contacted Yu Guifu's family to conduct DNA tests, which confirmed a blood relationship. They were able to establish that the victim was indeed Yu Guifu. Fu earned a living as a 3-wheeled cargo driver, taking on odd jobs as they came. His social relationships were not complex, and he had no debts. He was described as gentle and not involved in any significant conflicts. His daily routine involved working to support his granddaughter without competing or conflicting with anyone. The preliminary investigation indicated that he did not have any known enemies or major disputes. On the afternoon of his disappearance, Fu called his younger brother Yu Kuizhong. Over the phone, he informed his brother that he had been hired to transport goods at night for a high price and asked Zhang to come to his house and take care of his 8-year-old granddaughter. Fu didn't provide specific details about whom he was transporting goods for or the destination. Following his brother's instructions, Zhang arrived at Fu's house around 10 p.m. and stayed there for the next 2 days to look after Xiao Yu. The next day, when Fu didn't return, Zhang tried to contact him several times but couldn't reach him. Given the information that the victim had been hired for nighttime cargo transportation on the night he went missing, the police suspected that the person who hired Fu was highly likely to be the prime suspect in the murder, as conflicts might have arisen during the job. The police immediately contacted the telecommunications service provider to check the call history and discovered that the last individuals Fu had contacted on the day of his disappearance included his working daughter in Sichuan, a neighbor, his younger brother, Yu Kuizhong, and 3 other people. However, these individuals were gradually eliminated as suspects due to evidence of unrelated crimes, and none of them had hired Fu for cargo transportation. Initially, the police suspected that the victim may have lied to his younger brother on the night of his disappearance, asking him to babysit because he had to leave the house in the evening for some reason that he didn't disclose, or the person he hired had met him directly on the way without arranging it over the phone. However, now that Mr. Fu is deceased, and there are no leads to identify the person who hired him because they didn't communicate over the phone, and there were no witnesses, the police are puzzled. At this point, since Mr. Puk's tricycle has disappeared, the police decide to focus on gathering information about the vehicle to solve the case. The Zhizhou District Police have explored the area around Mr. Puk's residence and the river area where the victim's body was found, searching for nearly 4 days but still haven't found Mr. Puk's tricycle. Now the police begin to doubt the statement of Mr. Zhang regarding the victim being hired on the night of his disappearance and put the victim's younger brother on the list of suspects. A man reported to the police that on the night of May 6th, he saw Mr. Puk standing in front of a house with Mr. Zhang, and the 2 brothers were talking to each other. However, he was standing at a considerable distance, so he couldn't hear their conversation. Yu Kuizhong, on the other hand, stated that he only went to his brother's house after receiving a call asking him to babysit for Mr. Fuk and did not meet his brother at the house. The witness confirmed that he was standing in a building opposite the victim's house and saw Mr. Fuk pulling a red-painted cart, but when he reversed the cart, it slid into a water channel and he struggled to lift it up. At that time, Mr. Zhang was standing nearby but didn't help his brother. After struggling for a while, Mr. Fuk pulled the cart and left. The conflicting testimonies of Mr. Zhang have left the police confused because there are no surveillance cameras, so they don't know who is telling the truth. Little Xiao Yu went to bed early at 9 p.m., so when asked, she didn't know if her grandfather returned that night or not. At this moment, the victim's son reported to the police that upon hearing the news of his father's disappearance, while he was working in Beijing, he hurriedly returned to Zhizhou. Surprisingly, his stepbrother, Mr. Zhang, suggested that the 2 nephews go to the Nianjiang River to search, and the exact location they searched was where Mr. Puk's body was discovered. Is it just a coincidence, or does Yu Kuizhong know something about this case? The police interrogated him about the incident, but Mr. Zhang showed no signs of worry and remained calm. Mr. Zhang explained that his older brother often brought little Xiao Yu here to play when he had free time, so when he learned that his older brother had gone missing, he immediately thought of going to the river to search. Mr. Zhang himself had been to that area a few times with his older brother, so he was very familiar with the Nianjiang River area. At this point, the police learned another piece of information, that Mr. Zhang has unstable nerves. His medical records show that he had a minor stroke and had to undergo training in acupuncture for a long time before he could return to normal life. Currently, the results of brain scans still show the presence of blood clots. Mr. Zhang has a problem with memory disorder, meaning he confuses the timeline of events in the past and has many erased memories. Therefore, it is possible that Mr. Zhang misremembered meeting his older brother and didn't intentionally provide misleading information to the investigators. This is truly a challenging case for the police because they cannot exclude Yu Kuizhong from the list of suspects, but they also lack evidence to accuse him. All the information the police have gathered so far is vague, without any concrete evidence or specific circumstances, and they cannot rule out any possibilities. Mr. Fu Shem didn't carry any valuable belongings when he went out except for an old mobile phone that his son bought for him as a gift, and a tricycle worth a few thousand dong. Would someone kill him just for these low-value items? However, if it's not about the possessions, why were his phone and tricycle taken away? While the case was gradually reaching a deadlock, another witness reported to the police that a few weeks ago a man named Puk had a conflict with a fisherman named Zhu Shan, who was 30 years old and worked by setting nets and placing baskets in the area to catch a fish for sale. Thien, despite being young, had a hot temper. One day, Puk sat by the river to cool off and wash his hands and feet, unintentionally sitting very close to the area where Thien had set his nets. Thien had experienced multiple instances of stolen fish, so when he saw Puk fidgeting around with a suspicious-looking cart in close proximity, he thought Puk was the one who had been stealing his fish. Thien angrily cursed and berated Puk, and they exchanged a few heated words before Puk left. The police investigated Thien's whereabouts and activities on the day Puk went missing, but because it had been a while, Thien couldn't remember precisely, and there was no evidence of his involvement in any criminal activities. Furthermore, according to the police's analysis, experienced fishermen like Thien had a good understanding of the area. Based on the rock found attached to the victim's body indicating that the body had been disposed of near the Nianjiang River, the police concluded that the crime scene was likely close to this riverbank. Additionally, considering the low water level, it was unlikely that the body would drift far away when thrown into the river. Instead, it would likely remain in the vicinity for several days until it decomposed and resurfaced. If the perpetrator was a fisherman from this area, they would be familiar with the water levels and the river's terrain. It wouldn't make sense for them to choose such an exposed location to dispose of the body, risking discovery and identification. Moreover, both Thien and most fishermen in the area owned boats, making it relatively easy to transport a body to a distant location and discreetly to dispose of it. Therefore, based on logic, Thien didn't appear very suspicious, although he hadn't been completely ruled out as a suspect. The police decided to focus their investigation on the area where the victim's body was discovered, as there was a high likelihood that the victim had been killed near this location. After multiple investigations, despite not obtaining any information about the murder case, the police obtained another suspicious lead. Several groups of swimming enthusiasts in the area reported a series of thefts at their makeshift campsites. These groups set up temporary tents using bamboo, wood, plywood, and canvas as an outdoor camping area for changing clothes after swimming. These individuals reported that all their food, canned goods, and belongings stored in the tents had gone missing. Although these weren't valuable items, when the police asked if they could pinpoint the exact day of the thefts, they were unsure. They only remembered that the last time they visited the river was a few weeks ago, and upon returning they discovered that all the food had been stolen, and even the belongings inside the tents had been overturned and broken. Considering the nature of the incidents, the police deduced that the disposal of the body must have occurred during the nighttime. During the day, many people came to swim in the area, and there was a relatively large bridge nearby, making it impossible for the perpetrator to dispose of the body during daylight hours. The thief who stole miscellaneous items from the campsites would also have to act at night, as they even smashed the belongings inside the tents. The time frame of the thefts coincided with the victim's death, and the victim's phone was also taken by the perpetrator. Based on these coincidences, the police hypothesized whether the thief and the murderer were the same person. However, the identity of this individual remained completely elusive, as they wore gloves during the search and theft, indicating experience in evading investigation and the possibility of having a criminal record. The lack of surveillance devices on both sides of the river, coupled with the elapsed time since the incidents occurred, posed challenges for the police in their search and investigation. The police have collected data from surveillance videos around the Nianjiang River area. After much examination and search efforts, they finally found that at around 4:48 a.m. on May 7th, a man dressed in camouflage clothes appeared on the surveillance screen, walking from the direction of the Nianjiang River towards the city center. He was wearing a backpack and carrying a grayish-blue cloth bag on his back. The police showed the surveillance video to the people who had set up camp by the river, and some of them recognized that the bag and backpack belonged to them. It was clear that this man was the one who had stolen items from the tents. According to multiple surveillance cameras on the street, the police observed that the man had been walking for over 2 hours and eventually disappeared when he turned into a residential area in Jianhua District. The police printed the man's picture from the camera and distributed it to each household in the area for identification, but no one knew the man's identity from the video. Everyone thought he was a stranger passing through the area. However, why was there no trace of him when he walked through this area? If he didn't enter the residential area and continued walking, the next cameras on the street would have captured his image. Could he have taken some form of public transportation? However, this residential area doesn't have a bus station, so it's possible that the thief took a taxi. Based on this reasoning, the police requested taxi companies in the area to check the GPS tracking system of each taxi driver who passed through the Jianhua residential area between approximately 7 o'clock and 8 a.m. that morning. Quickly, a local taxi company reported that one of their taxis had picked up a passenger in that area during that time frame. The police met with the taxi driver and he confirmed that he had indeed transported the man in the picture. He was also impressed by the man's distinctive clothing and the amount of luggage he carried. The driver mentioned that he dropped off the passenger at building number 58 in a residential complex in Tifeng district. The police immediately conducted a thorough investigation of the residence in building No. 58, but they found no suspicious leads and no one recognized the man from the camera. They continued to expand the investigation to neighboring areas and finally arrived at an internet cafe nearby where a female staff member recognized the photo of the mysterious man. She said that the man was not only a regular customer at the cafe, but was also present there at the moment using the internet service. Truly, this situation was a stroke of exceptional luck. The police slowly approached the suspect who was sitting and observing. The man seemed deeply engrossed in playing a game, and on the table there was a white iPhone that closely resembled the one owned by Mr. Fu, which his son had bought for him. Subsequently, the police immediately arranged for officers to surround and subdue the suspect on the spot. The man's name was Wang Wenjiang, 43 years old, and he earned a living as a freelance laborer in Zhizhou. The police checked his mobile phone and discovered that it didn't have a SIM card. Wang Wenjiang stubbornly claimed that he hadn't had time to insert a SIM card because he had just bought the phone. However, when the police showed him the image of him carrying the bag and backpack from the tent camp on the camera, he confessed to the theft but adamantly denied the accusation of murder. After many difficulties, the police finally found the suspicious man, but the problem now was to prove that this phone belonged to the victim, otherwise they could only charge him with theft. The police asked Wang Wenjiang to enter the password for the phone, and when he entered the password, the phone was successfully unlocked. Then the police checked the contents of the phone and found everything empty, but the investigators found some games on the device. Little Xiao Yu and the victim's son were brought in to examine the evidence. When they saw the game software on the phone, the little girl immediately recognized these familiar games installed by her grandfather, and the two of them had played games together many times. When they opened the game, the login information for the little girl was still saved there, proving that this mobile phone definitely belonged to Mr. Yu Guifu. At this point, Wang Wenjiang had no more excuses. Wang Wenjiang himself had a previous criminal record of theft and had only been out of prison for over a year. Wang Wenjiang confessed that on the night of the incident, he entered the campsite to commit theft. After finishing his work, he took a backpack filled with food and miscellaneous items and also carried another bag in his hand. While he was planning to leave, he saw a fire blazing in the distance at night. Out of curiosity, he walked towards the fire to check and discovered Mr. Fu sitting alone. By that time, Mr. Fu had finished transporting goods and was burning a pile of scrap wires to collect copper for extra income. When he saw the pile of burned copper next to Mr. Fu, Wang Wenjiang immediately felt greed and malice. He slowly approached, but Mr. Fu noticed him. Wang Wenjiang intended to attack discreetly but failed and resorted to robbery. The two struggled on the riverbank for a while. Due to Mr. Fu being much older than Wang Wenjiang, he was physically weaker, and within a few minutes of struggling, Mr. Fu was hit repeatedly on the head with a wooden stick grabbed by Wang Wenjiang, causing him to fall down. When Mr. Fu lay motionless, Wang Wenjiang approached, checked, and discovered that the victim was dead. Wang Wenjiang then searched the victim's body, but only found a white mobile phone. He pulled down the victim's outer pants to search the underwear, hoping to find a wallet, but all he got was a few yuan, which was the payment Mr. Fu had just received for transporting goods. Then he took out a large piece of cloth from the backpack, wrapped the victim's body, and tied it together with a large stone on the riverbank before throwing Mr. Fu's body into the river. Returning to the crime scene, he saw the tricycle and the victim's burned copper wires, but he only took the mobile phone and a few yuan from the victim. He threw the tricycle and the pile of copper wires into the river. He added that because he was carrying too much stolen food, he became tired after walking halfway to the residential area in Tifeng district and couldn't continue, so he had to take a taxi home. The police, based on his statement, went to the location near the river where he had disposed of the tricycle and the copper wires to retrieve the evidence. In November 2016, the People's Court of China sentenced Wang Wenjiang to the death penalty for the crimes he committed. Today's case reflects the psychology of those who are never satisfied, which is also a part of human psychology when they desire what others possess. For example, when you like a new car, you will start to see it more on the streets. Does that mean that everyone has bought more cars? No. It's just because you are paying more attention to it, so you focus on noticing it, and the perceived frequency of its appearance will be higher. For example, a colleague is holding the phone you dream of. At this moment, the question in your mind might be how they could afford it when their income is similar to yours, right? In reality, people only see the surface of others' happiness and possessions without thinking or caring about their difficulties. Honestly speaking, we have no idea how others obtain those things, but sometimes we have to accept the fact that we can achieve what we want, but we can't have everything we desire. To acquire that phone, your colleague probably had to save while we might spend money on fancy meals, movies, or trips. They gave up the exciting experiences we had in order to have that luxurious phone. But if we were to own those items, would they truly bring us lasting joy? Perhaps for a few days or weeks, and then we would start to see them as normal and taken for granted. Once we have what we desired, we quickly feel bored and may even lose our enthusiasm. This is the psychology of craving what others have. If we have a good and noble mindset, we will strive to achieve it. However, if we have a twisted and malicious mindset, it can be very dangerous, as seen in the story above. How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss. And if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.